And so we're going to get started. Judith Sachs is the founder and director of Anyone Can Move, an adaptive movement program in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Although she started her professional life on the stage and then moved to the healthcare arena, she now combines these two passions. Her goal is to get everyone moving, whether in a chair or across the floor. Judith is a certified Dance for PD teacher in Philadelphia and a 30-year practitioner of Qigong, push hands, a practice that maximizes balance and breath. In 2019, she piloted an innovative therapy program, Close Contact for Couples, with PD under a grant from Penn Medicine. In 2020, she was awarded a Parkinson Foundation Center of Excellence grant to improve partner communication with couples online. And in 2021, she was awarded a second year in cooperation with both the Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Center, Penn Medicine, and the Lou Ruvo Center for Brain Health in the Cleveland Clinic in Las Vegas, Nevada. As always, we're so happy you're here today, Judith.
Thank you, Eden. And Eden is also one of my favorite people. So it's a love fest on Valentine's Day, which I think is very important. So thank you so much for coming. I see a lot of you single in your Zoom box. And I don't know whether this is because you're just taking some time away from your partner today or whether you are single. But I want to talk about the fact that intimacy and reconnecting when you have Parkinson's is not necessarily just with a spouse or a person that you're living with. I mean, it can be a much bigger realm. And I will talk about that a little bit as well. So I want to first say that I am not a sex therapist. I am not a psychologist. I am a adaptive movement person. And at the end of my presentation, I am going to tell you if you need some medical help, if you need a direction to a sex therapist, or a social worker who deals with people with Parkinson's who are having intimacy problems, I'm going to send you there. But I think it will be interesting for you to hear what I have to say as a movement specialist and somebody who, as a dancer, deals with touch a lot of the time. And touch is what helps us to become more intimate, both with ourselves and with other people. So I am going to share my screen, and you're going to tell me if you can see things. And we're going to start here. And sorry.
Oh, do you want to go to the slideshow? There you go. Perfect.
Okay, great. Nope. That's not what I wanted either. Okay. So I am also going to talk about my Close Contact for Couples program. My grant from Johns Hopkins was just renewed, and we are starting a new program next month. And so if you are interested, Eden will tell you how to get in touch with me. So meanwhile, intimacy. The very word kind of gives us a little pause, because unlike these two people who are clearly staged in the middle of a beautiful space, looking so incredibly happy, it would be wonderful if every day were like this. But we certainly realize in the world that we live in, it isn't. And whether Parkinson's is a particular part of our lives, being coupled is not easy these days. And particularly as we age, if we have lived with somebody for a very, very long time, or we are starting a new relationship, maybe for a second marriage or partnership or a third. It's just, there are so many different factors that go into this. So that's why we're talking about it on Valentine's Day. And again, I'm going to constantly refer to the fact that I want to deal with couples. I don't want to deal with the intruder in the room, which is Parkinson's. Many people I deal with say, my whole life, from when I get up in the morning to when I go to sleep at night, there's some element of Parkinson's that I have to consider and that my partner has to consider. So right now, we're just going to take that particular piece off the table. Just bear with me. So why do people come apart? Well, I don't have to tell you really about any of these symptoms. I think many of you know that both motor and non-motor symptoms can have a great deal to do with whether you want to be intimate with somebody and whether you can be. So these symptoms are also impacted by the medications you take, when you take them, whether you are on or off. And then there's the whole business of how depression, apathy, fatigue, mood disturbances, all of those changes can make a huge difference in how you feel and how your partner feels about being with you. So the other part of this is pain. There's all types of pain that come with Parkinson's. And again, if you are feeling pain, it's very hard to get into the mood or get into the feeling of being relaxed that allows you to have fun and play and be intimate with your partner. And then there is what happens as we age, first of all, and as we look at ourselves differently because of some of these symptoms. So whether you have always felt a little bit like not the most attractive person in the room, or whether this disease has changed your physical awareness, your awareness of yourself, your body, how your body moves in space, how when someone touches you, you react. Those things are all make the business of being intimate a lot more difficult. And certainly the facial masking or the low voice, that's something that usually enters into an intimate relationship, whether you're, as they used to say, whispering sweet nothings to your partner, or just giving them a smile as they walk across the room. If you don't do that anymore because of this disease, that again impacts the way that you relate to your partner and your partner relates to you. So before we can talk about intimacy, we have to just begin at the beginning with communication. In my world, I feel that this disease becomes this tug of war very often. They don't touch one another because they're touching the rope. And again, that's why I'm asking you, at least for the period of time that we are talking here, and I hope you will talk back to me after I finish talking, that we're going to take the rope off the table and maybe get all of those four hands closer to one another. So what I have seen with a lot of the couples that I work with is this loneliness, this sense that even though you may be spending hours and hours together doing things, going to the doctor, getting ready for the day, helping with food preparation or pet preparation, pet help, that you're not really dealing with one another because there's a lot of actual physical things that need to be done. And if you're not dealing with one another and you're not dealing with what brought you together in the first place, it can feel very lonely. I have seen so many couples who look like this. They walk into the dance class and it looks like they're about to go to the hospital together. What we're trying to do is to, instead of have that frozen expression, to make them turn toward one another and maybe hold hands. Oops, I think I skipped one. So I'm going to give a few prescriptive suggestions. You may not want to take any of them, but the idea of this is you haven't done it for a long time, maybe. So you have to plan it. You have to make a time when you're going to talk to each other. You have to go to a place in your home or in your home where you both feel comfortable. Maybe the bedroom is not the best place for that. Certainly, no phones, no television. And if you get stuck in the middle and suddenly there is silence in the room, to just take a breath and accept that. And maybe just make eye contact, make hand contact. If you have vocal problems or facial mask problems, there is the opportunity to do this in writing. Maybe, again, in the very old days, even before any of us were around, people wrote each other love letters. And I think that's just a fabulous way to start reconnecting. You can do it digitally if you wish. You can go to your computer, you can do a text, and then have your partner read it aloud and see how they react to it. Just a fun idea. Partners really are there to listen. And the idea of listening without interrupting, without changing the subject, without making them feel stressed out because something you wanted to happen didn't happen. Again, everyone has to suddenly take a breath and maybe be quiet for a while. So this is the big one. And this is, again, my area of most interest. This is how we started out. Babies are a little bit nearsighted. Their perception of the world really comes from the warmth and the touch and the closeness and the feeling of someone else's breath on top of them. So I want you to just take a look at this and maybe internalize what that feels like if somebody does that to you now. If somebody just holds on to you for a moment. Again, this is not sexual. This is very intimate. And because it is our first experience as humans, we so react to it over and over and over again. And very often we're not doing it. So I'd like you to go back to that experience because this is what it led to, right? Maybe many of you out there had this experience the first time you connected with somebody in your early years. That may have been decades ago. And certainly some of the couples I've worked with have been married for 40 or 50 years. It's hard to remember back to that first time that you held hands. So again, I'm saying on this particular day, which is a Hallmark holiday, as Eden pointed out, sometimes it's good to just kind of stop and say, well, we have the opportunity. We're here. Why don't we just hold hands? So there's a lot of good research about what happens when people just touch one another, not even when the partners touch one another, but it really does, in fact, take away a lot of the stress of regular life. They've done MRI experiments where they actually have somebody in that terrible tube, and then they have a researcher or whoever's in there just hold their hand for a little bit. And the amount of stress that the brain and the nervous system is manifesting suddenly goes down. But the more interesting part of it, in terms of this particular study, was that when the actual partner came and held that person's hand in the MRI, there wasn't a lot of sparking in the MRI machine. Areas of the brain did not light up. And the discussion of the researchers afterward was that the reason for that is that this is the correct way that the brain wants to feel. The brain wants to feel that touch, that holding. If it doesn't feel it, there's a deficit. It's not that adding it on makes something unusual happen. So I think you probably recognize this, but sharing this burden that you are holding on to makes it a little bit easier. And so these nerve fibers that we have in our hands, and I hope before we end this today, we're all going to get to hold hands with somebody, even though we're on Zoom. The other interesting part of this is that this deficit of physical and emotional closeness really, really does make a difference. That loneliness that I showed the picture of the two people sitting away from each other on opposite sides of the bed, that makes a very big difference in how we can manage our lives, not just Parkinson's disease. So in our lives, we have these two types of touch. There's probably many more types of touch, but I just want to take the very big picture. So there is functional touch. And as the disease progresses, getting help getting out of a chair or into the car, getting help when you're slippery and wet, getting out of the shower, just makes each day a little bit more functional, right? Anyone could do that functional touch, and it's great to have your partner doing it. But it's not really the same as the intimate touch of, because that person was just sitting there in the living room and I was walking through, I just wanted to chuck him under the chin, or I wanted to ruffle her hair, or I wanted to just deposit my hand on his shoulder because it felt good, because I know that shoulder so well. I know it almost as well as my own shoulder. So that's what I'm saying is usually less addressed in the relationship, especially as the amount of functional touch grows more necessary. So today, again, I want us to take a step back, and not just for the care partner to be touching the person with Parkinson's, but both people to be touching one another. In my close contact for couples work, I ask people to drop their roles, drop the hats that you usually wear at the door. And whatever we're doing together in these workshops, one person helps the other, and then we switch roles, and the second person helps the first person to the best of their ability. And that's exactly what I'd like you to do today with loving touch. So if you look at these dancing couples, so this is the world that I came from. On the left, you see these kind of old-fashioned guys doing a waltz, and you can't see her legs because of the dress, but you basically, if her dress were raised, you would see four limbs, right? You'd see all four legs and you see all four hands. But in the tango silhouette on the right, it just looks like one person. These people trust each other. These people are holding each other so close that they can feel each other's heartbeat. And I go back to that picture of mother and child and say, we can recapture this all the time. You don't have to be a tango enthusiast, and you don't have to be holding your newborn. You can still have that feeling of somebody's warm breath on top of you, and you providing warm breath for somebody else. So this was one of the first groups before COVID. We were in a room, or close contact room, and you'll see the couple on the left holding on to one another as they walk on this rather squishy surface. So he, in this case, was the one with Parkinson's, and he was very unstable on his feet. She was also, as you can see, a good deal shorter than he. So a lot of what we do in these close contact for couples workshops is try to arrange the physics of what do the couple need to do to adapt to one another. But because they are holding each other, he has her around the waist, she has him around the waist, they might also use their front hands to hold on to one another for a little bit more stability. In the couple on the right, again, he had Parkinson's and he was very unsteady on his feet. So we had them sit down and play this game, kind of pushing, pulling, touching hands, touching fingertips, feeling the warmth of the palms in between the two sets of hands. And you see how they're looking at each other. These two people had been married. I know it was over 50 years. They met in high school. And really what happened between them was a wonderful experience of doing the simplest thing and playing with fingertips. And again, it's very, very simple. We've kind of lost that in our day-to-day complexities. So again, these are staged couples, but I want to remind you that taking turns is a very big deal, that the person who's giving support take back support. And sometimes you have to ask for it. And sometimes you don't have the words for it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. What does it mean to be intimate? So again, that word is usually associated with sexuality. As I've said to you, I'm not really going to go into that sphere very much because it's not, I am not a professional. But intimacy is not just that, right? You can have an intimate experiential moment with your partner as you both realize something that's going on in your life. Maybe something that other people don't know about. You can have an emotional moment of intimacy where you've heard some wonderful news about your child, and it doesn't mean as much to anyone else in the world as it does to the two of you. Maybe they got into that college. Your grandchild got into that college. There certainly is physical intimacy, and we will talk about that. It does not have to be sexual. Mental intimacy, sharing moments of learning something, of reading books together, listening to the same piece of music and finding it affects you in the same way. And then also spiritual intimacy, if you share the same values. It does not have to be a religious type of spiritual intimacy. Maybe you've both started meditating together, and that gives you something that you love to do with one another that doesn't necessarily involve an exchange of information. So I'm going to say that the shared joke, my husband and I used to have these key words. All he had to do was say juice box, and I would start laughing because of some joke that had become a big deal between the two of us. And all we needed was the punchline, right? So that definitely is something that you share. Communicating with one another for real, trusting that you have something that will make you unique to one another. And it gives a feeling of safety, and it also mitigates that feeling of loneliness, as I said. And then there's the idea that this relationship, I'm kind of assuming the people in the room, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't be assuming anything, but that there is a relationship that's been around so long that you do feel secure with one another and safe, and you trust one another. And so for that reason, you can touch without an ulterior motive. Touching does not have to lead to sex. Just the moment of being with one another is very different, again, from being with anybody else. So I just love these pictures and think you will too. So there are actual benefits that can be conferred with being intimate with one another. And we do know that blood pressure goes down. There are higher levels of oxytocin. And that's, as a matter of fact, the mother-baby thing, that's something that nursing allows us to produce more oxytocin, which is one of the great hormones in the body. And because dopamine is getting lost in the process of the progression of Parkinson's disease, building up some of these other hormones that attach us to our partner is very, very important. So oxytocin is a very big one, and all you have to do is hold hands. We know that there can be better healing after surgery, healthier behavior if you've been trying maybe to eat better, to do the exercises your physical therapist told you to do 3 times a day. I don't know whether longer lifespan really is in the cards, but there are a few studies that show that. So how do you do this? If you have not been doing this for a very long time, I really go back to that suggestion that I made at the beginning about writing a love letter, because first of all, it's going to be something you do by yourself without your partner's interference, without your partner saying, can I help a little bit with that? Or, wow, I really didn't like that word too much. This is something you create at the beginning, and it makes you kind of think back to the feelings you had when you first encountered that partner, when you first held hands. So before you even read this slide, I'm saying, spend a little bit of time alone by yourself and really think of what things do you want to reconnect with your partner. Yes, maybe it is a sexual relationship, but that has to be discussed. The first thing that may be able to happen is, why was this particular person the one you picked? And why did they pick you? So a little bit of thoughtfulness before you rush into the idea of, let's make a date to share this information. If you do make this date and you get to turn around on the couch or on the bed, remember that scheduling is a great idea at this point. But for one reason or another, whether it is pain, whether it's the medication being off, this date may not happen. And it's best not to count too much on the first or second time you try to do this. As a matter of fact, it might be good for both of you to set a calendar time and date for maybe just 15 minutes to hold hands. And if you want to start with once a week or twice a week and then have that lead to something else, that might be a good way to start. So in the world of sexuality, which again, I'm not really, there are exercises called sensate focus exercises, and they deal with temperature, touch, and pressure. And those 3 elements, again, do not have to be while you are lying in bed together. Those 3 elements could simply deal with holding hands. If you have your hands close to one another, and I'm just going to say, if you happen to be sitting with your partner right now, maybe you'll do what I am suggesting. That you take one palm each and you put the 2 palms together. So 1 second, I am just going to stop sharing. And instead, let's see if we can do this. So you're just going to put these palms together. And if you remember that picture of the couple who were pressing one another's hands, and then you dome your fingers toward one another and maybe play a little bit with fingertips. And then maybe play with the backs of the hands and the webbing of the hands. And then sliding. So one person may do this, then the other person may do this. Then thinking about the heels of the hands. Hands have so many parameters to them, right? Maybe just the thumbs. This seems basic because it is. But again, starting at the bottom, if you have not been doing anything like this, or if the attempt to become a little bit more intimate has been frustrating, the best thing to do is to go back to the beginning. So I'm going to share my screen again. Let's hope I know it's not going to come back where I wanted it. Oh, maybe it is. Okay. Hold on. Oh, yes, I'm going to have to rush through to get to where we were. Okay, so these are all ways, I think I may be repeating myself, but in addition to feeling a little bit more relaxed, both about yourself and your partner, the idea of feeling better about yourself is really very important. It can give you some self-esteem and confidence, maybe even some vitality in the face of a lot of fatigue that you go through. And that can certainly lead to better quality of life. So, as I've said, I want you to really just feel the hands. And then maybe later today, depending on where you are in the country, if it's okay to take off your shoes and socks, you're going to do that. I'm going to play a little piece of a sex therapist who is one of my mentors. Her name is Gila Brunner from Tel Aviv, Israel. And I met her last summer at the World Parkinson Congress, where if any of you happen to be there, she gave some really extraordinary and wonderful descriptions of how she works with couples. So I'm not sure if this is going to play in here. No, so I am instead going to play it here. You tell me if you can see this.
One of the questions that many people with Parkinson, their partners or caregiver, but also doctors ask me a lot. They ask me, how does the disease affect sexuality? What is the relationship? What is the connection between these two issues? And I can tell you as a sex therapist that actually the relationship is very interesting, and it is multi-level relationship and also a dynamic relationship. What do I mean? I mean first that you can sense or experience sexual problems in all stages of the disease. Even when the symptoms only begin, during the progressive stages of the disease, and also even if you have some problem, one problem, it doesn't always stay with you. Sometimes it disappears, and sometimes something new comes. It's not very good and news for those who have Parkinson or have to live with Parkinson, but it is important to know. So what are the associations? How does the PD, the Parkinson disease, and how does the treatment of the disease affect? So let's first think about one of the common problems. And you know that one of the common problems of the Parkinson disease is depression or depressive mood or anxiety. Now, depression has effect on our sexuality because when people are depressed, usually they will not have the mood for sex, meaning that we will notice some decrease in desire, even a lack of desire, which can happen to you as a person with Parkinson, but also to your partner, to your intimate partner, because, you know, our intimate partner are affected by our moods. Then it will be difficult for us when we are depressed to get aroused, meaning that if you are a man, you will have difficulties with your erections. And if you are a woman, you will have difficulties in your arousal, in lubrication. You might even have sometimes painful intercourse. And of course, if we have problems in arousing ourselves, we will have problems in having orgasm. So as you can see, only depression or depressive mood can affect all the stages of our sexual response. Now, let's say that as a person with Parkinson, you get treatment for the depression. And usually you will get SSRIs, which are kind of antidepressant. But antidepressants make you more relaxed. And then you have a better mood. But they have another effect. They slow your body. And that means that when you will have sex, it will take you longer to get aroused and sometimes longer to reach your orgasm. In some cases, even you cannot reach orgasm at all. And you will see that you try and try and try, and nothing ends. And this is very devastating. Let's say that you are a man and you are trying to have intercourse and it doesn't end. So then you will lose your erection in the end. And if you are the woman, the partner of this man, then after 10 minutes or after 5 minutes of effort, you will be very disappointed. And then later, both of you lose the energy or the will to have sex again. So you have to know that when you use antidepressants, and if you have a problem with your reaching orgasm, then know that this is part of the problem, and maybe you have to plan your sexual activity differently. For example, stop it in the middle and don't wait for an orgasm. It's okay. It's not always we have to wait for the last stage. Now, let's think of another thing. You know that Parkinson disease is a disease that one of its manifestation is motor, meaning problems with movement. So what does it have to do with sexuality? First, all the question of fine finger touching. Now remember, sexuality has to do a lot with touching. We are caressing one another. We are holding one another. For many women, the touching of their partner is very important. It helps them get concentrated, get aroused, feel experiencing or feeling of desire. That means that if you lose this fine finger touching, then you will have a problem with the arousal. Now we have problems with moving. You know that in sex we move sometimes. It's not like a gym training, but we move a little. For example, let's say that you are caressing one another, and then you want to continue your intercourse, and you want to change a position. The man can be over the women, over the woman in the man above position, or the woman can be over the man. And if you have Parkinson, the movement, the demand to concentrate on moving, it's so demanding from you that sometimes you lose all the arousal that you have already gained. And you will find that you have to plan the position of your body not in order not to lose it. Then we have other problems. For example, you know that there are non-motor problems of the Parkinson disease. For example, the speech is very, very low. And you know that sometimes the face is masked and we don't see expression, vivid expressions. And you know that couple communication has to do with speech. Telling my spouse that I love you should be said in a loud voice. And if it is in a very apathic tone, like I love you, she doesn't believe you or he doesn't believe you. Whatever is the person, whoever is the person with the Parkinson. So we have a problem of speech, and then we have a problem of changes in the face expression that do not reveal what we really feel. So we have to find ways to say it better in a better way. And then we have the treatment, the various dopaminergic treatment of the Parkinson, which might cause some of you have problems with erection. Sometimes men even have problems with ejaculation, like premature ejaculation that you never experienced before, and suddenly you have it, and you have to cope with it. And maybe you will have different kind of changes that you never thought of. So what I'm saying is, if you sense any problems, new problems that you then didn't sense before in your sexual response, in your sexual activity, in your sexual relationship, ask your physician, Maybe it has to do to your Parkinson. Maybe it has to do to the treatment. And maybe your doctor can change the medication or the treatment or add something like another medication which can cure your problem. So don't stay with the disease. Don't stay with its effects. Do something about it, and good luck.
So I'm just going to go back to the slides. She is really one of the world experts in this field. But I do want you to know, and we'll say again at the end, that if you feel that a sex therapist would be able to help you, the Parkinson Foundation has a national list, and it may be possible for you to find somebody in your area as well. So I'm going to take you away from the idea of sex, because playing with one another is so important. And playing can lead to laughing, and laughing can lead to intimacy, and can remind you of the reason that you got together in the first place. So again, in our Close Contact for Couples program, we play. You can see these people are trying to keep the balloon between them. This has a lot to do with touch and touching one another, but using the prop, again, to sort of keep you a little bit separate. If you can understand, they're trying not to touch it with their hands, only with their bodies. And so their bodies have to collide in a variety of different ways. And it's a lot of fun, and they drop the balloon and then they have to pick it up. So another thing, again, depending on where you live, is the amount of clothing that you have on and choose to have on. Again, it's wonderful if you happen to be in a warm place. And then it's also great to experiment with different areas that you never thought of before. I remember a whole discussion of sitting on top of the dryer in the laundry room, as one partner is on it and one partner is not. So remember that a discrepancy in desire, and Dr. Broner began talking about this, a discrepancy in desire is very often the case, especially for partners where one person is taking a dopamine agonist, which may create a much more sexual interest in the person with Parkinson's than they ever had before, and that the partner has. So this has to be discussed. It really has to be discussed. And I think, I mean, the other thing she happened to say was, please ask your doctor. You know that your doctor, unless you have some very unusual movement disorder specialist, probably will not bring up the issue of sexuality. Maybe your nurse practitioner or your PA will, but probably this is something you are going to have to bring up, which means, again, discussion at home between the two of you, and then figuring out where in the conversation with your professional are you going to discuss the medications that you're taking and how they may be affecting your sex life. This is clearly not something you can look at right now, but many people don't have the words. They just never were brought up with that refinement of how do I feel right now? So this particular feelings wheel is available on Amazon. It's got every kind of feeling you could possibly have. And one of the great things about using it is if you don't know how you feel, but you just want to play with these words, it may open up a conversation with your partner. The other thing is to always, and I'm sure you've been told this, to use I words. When you did X, I felt Y. I would love to feel more Z when we touch. So you might be saying, I miss feeling close to you, or I love when we hold hands together. Anything that is coming out of you that relates to the partner, rather than saying what the partner is doing and how it affects you. So the other thing that we've been doing in close contact for couples is taking away that element of sight. You know, I said something about the baby is nearsighted at the beginning, which is why the mother's touch and holding is so important. But we tend to start looking at things, right? Whether it's ourselves in the mirror or our partner, and that can take us away from what we really want to do. So this is such a simple way to start touching hands. Use a blindfold, close your eyes. Maybe, as this woman is doing, find a Valentine's treat and share it with your partner. It also is important to start thinking about sex differently from the way you used to. You don't have to talk about everything at once. This is a set of layers, right? Especially if you're beginning with something like the words for how you feel, the loving touch as you walk across the living room and ruffle somebody's hair. You want to really get back to basics. So please don't try and race to the finish line. I think I've actually talked a lot about this, the facial masking and the speech problems. But the other thing is, I had one couple where after the course, the partner said to me, "Oh, finally, I know he won't break when I touch him." So very important to communicate things like that. These common problems, again, Dr. Broner mentioned a lot of things about erectile dysfunction. For women, a lot of involuntary urination or vaginal tightness, impaired sexual functioning or reduction of interest in sex and desire for sex. So this, again, is not my realm. I'm just putting the slide up here, but something that should be discussed with a professional. And please remember that you have to use your words, as we used to say to our kids. Actually say, "Can I kiss you? Would you like a hug? Would you feel more comfortable if?" And there are various different word maps. Again, this is taken off of somebody else's PowerPoint, but if you start with the words love, connection, and closeness, where does this lead you? What other things? I mean, I like, the authenticity, the dependability. What things about your partner have made this relationship so important for the last however many years you're together? Creating one of these things together is another way to share. So if sex is very uncomfortable, she mentioned different pillows. There are actually companies that make very substantial pillows that can conform to the body. Water-based lubricants, if that is one of the problems. Vibrators and other sex toys. Using the bathroom before initiating any sexual activity. Timing your date for an on period. And certainly waiting till after a meal. And then simple things like finding some erotica to share with one another. If it's not immediately coming out of you, most people are a little bit embarrassed to talk about their fantasies. This is a great new resource. The APDA just came out with a set of cards, playing cards, called Parkinson Sex. There is also a piece of the website that gives you, I would say it looks a little bit cartoony, but it's a very lovely description of intimacy and sexuality with drawings that are very restrained, shall we say. It's kind of cartoons of a lovely couple with a beautiful vine trailing around them. So again, this is these are two new resources. And as I said, if you go to the Parkinson Foundation site and you type in sexuality, you probably will be able to find resources in your area. I also want to mention that sex is different for different couples. And everything I have been saying today may happen between married couples, between gay or straight couples, between unconventional couples, but it happens and we want it. So my next adventure with Close Contact for Couples will begin with a live in-person event in Baltimore, Maryland. I am very thrilled to be collaborating with MAPS, the Maryland Association of Parkinson's Support, and Johns Hopkins, who are going to be helping out with this date night in the afternoon, Renewing Connections. It's going to take place March 9th from 3 to 5 p.m. in Baltimore, and it will be the prelude to the new Close Contact for Couples workshops, some of which will be live in Baltimore and some will be on Zoom. And I hope that you will contact me at anyonecanmove@gmail.com to find out more about this. So, with only a few moments left, please let me know, are there questions, comments?
Well, somebody who checked out really quickly did state that apparently the Parkinsex is on backlog.
Is
So
what?
it's on backlog. So clearly a lot of people are interested in it.
Wow.
But yes, we have to, so you might need to be patient. Somebody did ask if you could be a little bit more specific about finding a sex therapist.
So I have realized that, again, this is not my field. There are two people in Oregon, Sheila Silver, who was instrumental in creating that APDA booklet, and Kelly Reese, who's going to be partnering with me in Baltimore from Oregon. You may need to find some people who are not in your immediate area who will connect with you on Zoom. And I think what I'd like Eden to do is just, I will make a list of the people that I have been in touch with and I feel comfortable with. And I don't know whether they will work with you on Zoom, but they may. Is that helpful?
Eden? Yes, and I can always reach out. It was a direct message, so I can also reach out to this person and just let him or her know so that this way they can have this. Because this is a very important conversation and nobody wants to talk about it. But obviously the fact that the cards are on backlog tells us all we need to know. But there is, I know personally when you were talking about sharing the burden, we just did a program out in Glendale, and for 2 hours there was turbulence that was not good, but for 15 minutes it was scary, scary turbulence. And I actually went to the person and I said, may I please hold your hand? And it calmed me down a little bit. You know, even though I was like, I'm sorry, I'm making you hold a total stranger's hand, but it made me feel much better.
Oh, it does. It absolutely does. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that everybody out there, and it's the simplest thing. It's so easy to do that. And we don't always think of it as a first line stress reduction event.
Any other questions or anything? If you are uncomfortable, you can send them to me directly in the chat instead of to everyone. You can just send it directly to me. Kelly is also putting multiple links in the chat. I really encourage everybody, if you are in your chat, if you go to file, you can save your chat this way. And so I really do want you to discuss, be aware. And somebody said it's very difficult to bring this up with a therapist.
The third person who just did the Parkinson Foundation presentation is Laura Zeitlin, who is in Michigan at Michigan Medicine. And her name is Zeitlin.
Mm-hmm. Any other final thoughts or anything? Well, as always, Judith, we're so glad you were here. This was just wonderful. I do think it's important to have these conversations because I know people are uncomfortable having done this as a social worker. People don't like to have this conversation, but it's so important because, I mean, they have done studies on the importance of touch and how babies, when untouched, will die if they're not held. And it's such a important thing that does get overlooked. So as always, and again, save your chats. We have a tradition here at PMD, our wave of gratitude. Thank you so much for being here today. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day. Happy Valentine's Day and a good rest of your week. Bye, everyone.